And the way this works, as you guys know, is that you have a ability to request to speak. So on your Twitter space, you request to speak. I will give you the floor. You can make whatever arguments you want. You can even have as long as you want, within reason. You can't ramble all day about me being a KGB sorcerer or whatever dumb thing you think. Got to make cogent arguments. So, it's not that high of a bar, right? Maybe nowadays it is a really high bar to ask people, just make a cogent argument. Argument doesn't mean you argue with me or yell at me like a domestic dispute on cops. This ain't FX. This ain't Fox in 1995 with, domestic dispute with the popo being called. Okay? Don't argue with me about me and yell at me. Just make an argument. It's that simple. And I got one, not my first. Actually, I think my third physical threat today by some weirdo on Instagram. And so it seems like maybe it's because it's a full moon. I don't know if it was last night or tonight's a full moon. Things are getting crazy. People going crazy. Dude's like, you think you're a tough guy? No, tough guy. Do I ever talk about being a tough guy? Like I'm out here trying to fight people? A tough guy. You mean debates? I come from an atmosphere, a milieu, an ethos of academia where you debate. That's part of what you do in philosophy. You have your ideas challenged. You want to have your ideas challenged. Well, we're getting to a sort of a crescendo nowadays, I think, where people are terrified of having their ideas challenged and they're just lashing out, right? They can't deal with the issues. And so now they got to say, I'm going to beat you up in Nashville, dude. I'm going to beat you up. Well, okay, good luck with that because I typically have LUGER around. And if it's an issue at an event, well, I hire private security. So good luck with that. But beyond that this morning, then we got all these people on Twitter because I was talking about degenerate monarchs. Should we actually be praising degenerate monarchies? What's the right attitude? It's odd because, number one, on the one hand, you have all these establishment people and normies, right, who they don't have any interest in monarchy at all. I've had people come at me for a long time because of being pro-monarchy. And they diss me and say stupid stuff because of that, right? Oh, he's crazy. Especially a lot of libertarians. He's a fascist. What, because I'm monarch? Do you think fascists liked monarchists historically? No, they didn't. So what are you talking about? All right. And then you get this other opposite extreme of dummies who think that somehow monarchy is inherently based, trad. Really? Sure about that? Because when the Israelites asked for a monarchy, they asked for a monarchy for bad reasons, to be like the nations around them. And they're scolded by Samuel because they're told that they wanted a king. They didn't want God as their king. And ultimately, by the way, I think there's a Christological element to that text because it's the Logos who will be the king that they recommend, that they reject. Okay. Monarchy in itself is not necessarily based. I'm sorry to tell you guys this. And I don't know where people got this idea. Like they thought, oh, it's inherently based. No, it's not. Monarchy for monarchy's sake is idolatry. And that is the meaning of the text in Samuel, where it's like they don't want God as their monarch. They want a monarch like the pagan kings. However, monarchy is the form of government that, providentially speaking, Scripture, tradition, and the whole history of the Orthodox Church has providentially accepted. It's the only form of government which has a quasi-sacramental rite, the coronation service in the Orthodox Church, the coronation of a monarch. So in our view, my view is that it is the best form of government. So there should be Orthodox kings and queens. However, we're not primarily politically motivated. So we don't try to convert kings and queens and force everybody to be top-down Orthodox converts. That's dumb. And that just causes more historical problems than it does anything else. However, when the majority of the population does affirm the Orthodox religion, we think there should be an Orthodox monarch, and that's what's happened in church history. Pretty simple, right? So we're not a politically motivated church, but we do have something to say to the realm of the state and politics. And there's absolutely no way to divorce that from the history of the church. It's not even, it's so bizarre that anybody would challenge that, given how fundamental it is to the history of the church. And as my godfather has said many times, can you count how many Orthodox saints there are who were not monarchists? It's 0, right? Exactly. How many Orthodox saints were monarchists? Explicitly. All of the ones that talk about it and support or mention some form of government. Yeah. So no saints that believed in democracy. None of them talked about republics. So it is the biblical form of government. The New Testament says that. Proverbs says that. We've done tons of streams on this. I'm not repeating all of that. But that doesn't mean that modern day monarchs are inherently more based or trad. Today's monarchs in the world are some of the most degenerate people in the world. Many of them were co-opted, especially during the Cold War, under legitimate reasons and legitimate auspices. Work with us, the West, Western intelligence. Otherwise, Sovietism, Bolshevism, etc. will overthrow you. Right? And a lot of monarchs, a lot of right-wing governments, etc., especially during the Cold War, bought into this, and ever since have been, in some way, assets, subordinate to, connected to, relegated to, doing the bidding of Uncle Sam and the CIA. So this is not conspiracy theory. It's geopolitics 101 when you get into the history of espionage, especially during the Cold War. If you are a king or a queen, do you think you're going to find more support on the part of Soviets or the CIA? Okay, it's a no-brainer. So who do you think the CIA co-opted during the Cold War? Monarchs. This is public. Look up the King of Jordan, Time Magazine, his long-standing relationship with the CIA. Look up the leaders of Afghanistan, Karzai, etc., right? Long-standing relationships with the CIA. Go back to the Saudi monarchs and their history with British intelligence, with T.E. Lawrence. There's a whole movie about this with Peter O'Toole, Lawrence of Arabia. Go back to Kim Philby, right? Helping to set up the Saudi royal family as an attaché, as a structure within the British Imperial structure. That is the history of the Saudi royal family. Iraq, modern day Iraq, also a product of the British Empire. So that's a good transition to where I want to go next, which is the British Empire. Now, if you heard my talk today at Lord Voldemort's, then you know that I sort of touched on this. And I want to go a little bit deeper into it before I open it up to anyone who wants to come on and debate. The reason I know about this is because I got interested in this through my grad work. I got into the history of British espionage and intrigues. I'm not an expert on British history. I do know a decent amount, though, about British imperial intrigue. So I can happily speak to that, particularly and especially during the Cold War, and even further than that. And not just the spy stuff, but more so the overall ethos and attitude of the British Empire, especially after the Protestant Revolution, right? After Henry VIII and so forth. So if we want to get a little overview of this history, again, some of this I touched on in today's Lord Voldemort Hour 4. all of this is just really weird because of the providential temporal tie-ins. How all this is sort of because it's independent of anything going on in the world. I had just finished reading a big long thing, hundreds of pages on Victor Rothschild and his relationship to British intelligence. Simultaneous to that, also reading Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution by Dr. Sutton, and getting into the Milner-Fabian ethos, right? The real ideological nexus of what's going on in terms of the Royal Society's attitude towards Bolshevism. And even Quigley notes that amongst the British elite, there was a period where there was actually some scandal and dispute amongst the elite about Bolshevism, right? So you have some of the British elite who said, this is a danger. This is terrible. And you had other members of the British elite, particularly the Fabians, coming out of that John Ruskin, Cecil Rhodes, and Lord Milner's group, Milner's Kindergarten, etc., who believe, no, a socialism, a world socialist republic is what we need to set up. The British Empire needs to transition into a global socialist world order. So even though they might have had similarities with Bolshevism or other groups, and they were the ones that principally promoted Bolshevism. This is why the British government turned to support the Bolsheviks. I just read the whole page, put it on Twitter, from Sutton, where the Lloyd government switched over to supporting the Bolsheviks. And that was at the behest not just of Lord Milner and the Fabians and their pressure. It also involved compromise of people in government. That was also at the behest of pressure being put on the West to accept Bolshevism on the part of J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, and other powerful interests. Why? Why would they want to support Bolshevism? Because at that level, there was the belief that Bolshevism would be better for the bringing in of the final goal of the technocracy than the other forms of government. That simple. This is why when we read Bertrand Russell, writing long ago from the Fabian Royal Society perspective, he talks about in Scientific Outlook in 1931 that the Bolshevik Revolution has been a tremendous experiment and a success in terms of scientific technocratic government. He's representing the fake liberal side of the Royal Society, who did want Bolshevism, Sovietism, as an experiment in not just destroying the culture of Russia before, but in also bringing forth the end goal of the technocracy that was planned long ago. I mean, he says this in the book. He praises the Bolsheviks and Stalin. Now, Stalin switches, right? He doesn't do what he's expected to do by these people who are putting money into him. And sometimes assets and people who are funded by these people don't do what they're supposed to do. And when you don't do what you're supposed to do, well, then a coup comes. Then you get a revolution. This is always what happens. Saddam was put into power by the CIA, famously. There's a picture of him shaking hands, chilling with Rumsfeld, because he was a CIA asset for the Baathists. The CIA is who set up the Baathist Party initially, when the CIA, according to Miles Copeland, wanted Arab nationalism, a pan-Arabism. Then they decided, forget that. We will go with the older British model of co-opting and using radical Islam. Do you understand this? This is why 1979, Brzezinski, Al-Qaeda, etc. Right? What is it? Operation Cyclone, I think. Right? Are we aware of this? So, we're got to step above the low IQ, dumb level of stuff of right-wing, left-wing, good guy, bad guy. Okay? We're a level or two above that dumb, low IQ dialectic. Are you with me? And we're going to get into the books that discuss this. And then, if you want to debate me, I'm going to let you on. You can make your arguments. So when we understand that, let's go back in time a little bit to talk about when the British Empire, especially after Henry VIII, right, creating their own kind of state-run religion. in my view, this is a key point of problematic departure. Now, you could go back to the filioque and the unfortunate history of this being accepted in England too. But we're not really into the domain of theology tonight. We're going to be talking about the geopolitics. But unfortunately, yes, right. So England unfortunately ended up under papism, and the excesses and absurdities and contradictions of papism end up with the investiture controversy. Okay, and this is principally going on in England. England is one of the key places where the investiture controversy is such a big deal, because guess what? The kings historically had a role in appointing bishops and archbishops. Did you know that? Did you think that the Pope always appointed the Archbishop of Canterbury or all bishops in England? Of course not. The churches were autocephalous, or national churches, prior to medieval papalism. So what unfortunately occurred in this dispute was what's called the investiture controversy, and you would get kings getting mad because they wanted their bishop in, or their archbishop in, and the Pope wanted his man in. Thus, you could see why it would lead to the investiture controversy. So this struggle between Pope and King, and this is not just England, it's also other places, is partly what will lead to the Protestant Reformation. There's other theological issues, but it's not just theological. Okay, it's not just sola fide and justification by faith, sola scriptura, right? There's other issues that preceded and prepared the way for Protestant Reformation in all these countries. And the German princes, for example, that was a big reason why they supported Luther. So a lot of nerds who don't know history, they think, oh, it's all theological. Oh, it's all everybody was just debating the theology. No, there's also state power involved in this. Luther would never have been able to do what he did if he hadn't had the support of German princes. And a lot of people getting mad at the Pope, because that's the geopolitical domain, an area that we have to understand. It's a big part of this history. It's not all nerds studying theology. Okay, nerds studying theology don't call the shots in geopolitics. Okay, who is Putin? Is anybody asking the nerds, the theology nerds, what to do? Is Biden calling up, right, the theology? Well, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? You're a theology student. I should listen. No, they don't give a damn about stupid theology nerds. Do you think back then that the kings and queens typically just did whatever the theology nerds told them? Come on, grow up, dude. Let's get into the reality of power struggles in geopolitics. And guess what? It's not just new. That's not something that occurred in the 20th century. This has gone on all the time. So, I'm waterlogged. I was in the ocean. I got water in my ear. So the British Empire emerges out of Protestant Reformation, obviously. And we've got this idea, particularly if we go back to Elizabeth. And I'm not a British historian primarily, so don't misunderstand my take on this. But what I did study was English lit and British intrigue and espionage. So I know this quite a bit. And if you go back to the Elizabethan period, Elizabeth commissioned Edmund Spenser to write what she wanted to be the epic poem for the British Empire. It's called The Fairy Queen. Are you familiar with this? And she said, I want what Virgil did for Rome, Virgil's Aeneid being the epic propaganda myth for the Roman Empire. I want you to write that for me, the Virgin Queen. And so he wrote The Fairy Queen. And the weird thing about this is that the Fairy Queen is not Christian. It's a pseudo-Christian epic poem. And to be honest, in many ways, it's a pretty wild and amazing literary achievement, right? But it's also pseudo-Christian. It's suffused with alchemical and hermetic ideas, Neoplatonic ideas, reincarnation, etc., and not really anything to do with Orthodox Christianity. But it functioned perfectly to create a new kind of Virgin Mary mythos for Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, and her empire. The other thing that Elizabeth was very adept at, and you can go look up the famous painting of her with wearing this big gown with eyes all over it. Human eyes. She didn't really have a gown of human eyes, although she may have. Who knows, right? That was because she had, famously, the most infamous, vast, intricate spy network in the world. One of those famous spies was a guy named John Dee. John Dee was the first 007. He signed his 007 with a particular insignia to let Elizabeth know when he was sending her a message. He also created an occult magical language called Enochian magic, which utilized sigils, supposedly to speak to the celestial intelligences. However, really, he was using the magical language to send spy cryptographic messages back and forth. Okay, so this is coming out of the world of espionage and intrigue. If you don't know that, now you do. He's the first 007, John Dee, together with Edward Kelly, the most famous magicians of their time. This also kicks off the period of British intelligence basically getting a lot of their ethos and their ideology from that mythology of John Dee and being the astrologer, and right. And so you'll notice that a lot of British intelligence stuff refers back to that. Even the whole James Bond mythos, when Ian Fleming chose this, he's referring back to famous British historical figures and intrigues, right? The world is not enough. Okay, that was, I think, Walter Raleigh was the guy who coined that. But that's another famous British phrase that, later gets used in James Bond lore, but it actually comes out of the history of British intelligence. It's also a good garbage song, right, for the movie. So Elizabeth wanted Spencer to concoct this whole thing, and the Fairy Queen, it didn't really achieve this, right? It was too crazy, long, epic. It was too much. People couldn't handle that. It's so hard to decode. And if you go to university and take grad lit classes, your professors will go nuts getting you to try to decode all this stuff. I have grad papers on this on my website that I wrote years ago. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that what we can see at this period is that the British Empire is not Christian. There's a pseudo-Christianity. And it was a fad amongst the Elizabethan writers at this time. So you can read John Donne, Ben Jonson, Edmund Spenser, and even Shakespeare. And their writings are full of these alchemical esoteric themes. Because the Christianity that they had been sort of propagating and promulgating, especially after Henry VIII, this weird sort of Roman Catholic initially with Henry VIII doctrine that then gets gradually more and more Protestant, and there's these phases of high church and low church. Anyway, I'm not going to do a stream on the history of Anglicanism, but I suspect that quite early on, especially during this Elizabethan phase, that's probably when you had the inner-outer idea of esoteric Christianity, right, as the inner core going on with Anglicanism, and then a public exoteric Christianity. And it's very clear when it comes to even some of the architecture. I forget the name of the guy who did like the St. Paul's Cathedral, right? But it's kind of like Da Vinci and Bernini and these people too, where they put all this alchemical stuff in there. Oh, but it's Christian, sort of pseudo-Christian, but it's really Neoplatonic and alchemical Renaissance magic type stuff. That's all it is. What? Yeah, so there's a connection between Lutheranism and the Rosicrucians, and this is in Dame Frances Yates' book, Rosicrucian Enlightenment. She talks about how you can't separate the Enlightenment from the Rosicrucians, and there's a whole chapter on John Dee in that book. That's a great book to read if you want to get into Rosicrucianism, yes. But it's hard to say how many of the Elizabethan poets and writers and Anglicans were Rosicrucian. I don't know what they were, but they were beginning at this period to adopt speculative Freemasonry. And so a lot of Anglican ministers, especially in the 1700s, 1800s, were Freemasons. Now, does that mean that they were like all doing satanic ritual? No, I'm not saying that. But what the lodges functioned as by the time we get up to Elias Ashmole is that they become the spy intelligence network of the British Empire. And that's not me. That's not a conspiracy thing. That's public mainline historians. For example, Jessica Harlan Jacobs, Builders of Empire. How the British Empire utilized the Freemasonic spy networks as their spy network and how to help build the British Empire. So this has been going on for a long time, and this does not mean that every minister in the Church of England, whether high church or low church, was a secret Freemason. I'm not saying that. Many were, but not all of them. There were famous Anglicans who were public apologists and were very well known for, Bishop Butler for doing his natural theology apologetics. I don't know if Bishop Butler was into anything esoteric. I'm not saying that, okay? But many of them were, and many of them just, again, felt that, well, it would be a patriotic duty for me as a minister of the Church of England to be a spy for the Queen if I'm asked to do so. Guess what? Ministers today are still spies. That still goes on. I've covered these documents for years. There's been whole investigative inquiries on the part of Congress looking into the CIA's use of ministers, preachers, priests, and journalists for foreign operations. This is nothing new. This is what empires have done for a long time. Empires are interested in their religion, the religion of the empire, as a form of soft power. That's what it's called nowadays, especially after Joseph Nye's papers talking about soft power out of Harvard University, dealing with geopolitics, international relations. It's called soft power. So the state sees the church and its religion, or the churches, whatever, as an extension of soft power. That's just naturally how the state is going to see the religion. Because it's not a hard form, it's like a form of propaganda, or like we would view an NGO, right? Because it's not hard power, it's not exercising military strength, kinetic warfare, it's just exercising a form of influence. And if it's the religion of the empire, then it's going to be a religious soft power influence, okay? These are common terms in geopolitics and international relations. If you don't know this, now you do, and you should know this. And if you don't know this, don't be debating me on this stuff, because this is 101 on this stuff. So the British Empire, again, unfortunately, and I'm not a British historian, so I don't know the exact dates as to when, this is the date in which they adopted all of the esoteric stuff. It's a process, okay? Just like the Reformation with Henry VIII doesn't immediately remove all of the quote-unquote Catholic elements or trappings. It's later people, right? Cranmer's Revolution in liturgy. That changes monasteries and things like that in a more radical way. The liturgy gets changed in a more radical way. More radical than what we had seen prior to that. Because initially, Henry VIII, for example, he called himself defender of the faith. He was an apologist. He actually thought he would be a Roman Catholic apologist. And so when he created his state church, he wanted that really to just be a kind of Roman Catholicism. Later theologians in the Anglican tradition debate all the nuances and get into the revolution of the liturgy and all that stuff. There's a book by Eamon Duffy on this, right, about the liturgical revolution in England. It's a famous book. But anyway, I don't really care that much about that. I'm not a British historian. I don't really care about that. I do like British intrigue in terms of imperial geopolitics. And so as we get up into the period when we have Malthus. Malthus is important because Reverend Malthus is an Anglican minister who decides that he wants to adopt a philosophy that is really supposed to be an economic theory, but he stares at some jars with flies in them and determines that there's not enough resources in Britain to feed everybody. There's too many poor people. And so for the benefit of the poor and for England, so that it doesn't collapse, there has to be a vast renovation of how we understand socio-economic relations and the divisions of resources. And of course, it always ends up being this doom and gloom thing where they predict, we're all going to die. Hello, does this sound familiar? If we don't do X, Y, Z, we're all going to be dead in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Same model nowadays. Keep that in mind. So Malthus adopts this idea that will later be titled Malthusianism. And yes, I know that initially he was talking about economics. But so what? Eventually, this gets turned into a social theory about biological people hygiene, we'll call it. Other ideas are also concomitant with this, especially during the period of the acceptance of the British Empire of Darwinism. There we get not just Darwinianism as a biological, quote, pseudoscientific theory, we also get the idea of social Darwinism. And this again will be connected to the Malthusian idea of the limitation of resources and the notion of austerity. This becomes the modus operandi of many of the British elite, particularly characters like Sir Francis Galton, Charles Galton Darwin from the Darwin family, and I've read their books. I know what they say. I've lectured through these books. Don't come at me arguing with me and trying to debate me when you haven't read these books and you don't even know who these people are or what this is even about. There's all these idiots on Twitter. Why are you displaying your stupidity? Acting as if you know when you don't know anything about this stuff. When I've been here for at least 12, 13, 15 years, going through these books, lecturing all these books. And what do they talk about? So you can go from Sir Francis Galton all the way up to his, I don't know if it's his grandkid or whatever it is, Charles Galton Darwin in the 1950s, represented the exact same attitude of this clique of the Royal Society about how everyone needs to be put to death and how everybody is hurting Mother Earth, killing the planet. And we have to do this for the elite because it's their planet. That's what he says. And it's not just him as a representative of this elite class, this so-called superstructure. The British royal family is a huge proponent of this. They have been for years, for a long time. Going back to the one that abdicated his throne for Wallace Simpson, who famously supported Tiny Mustache Man. Why do you think he supported Tiny Mustache Man? How dumb are you when this is mainline history? And it's not just mainline history. In fact, when you get into the history of British intelligence, they talk about this. And many of the intelligence operatives are mystified by what the people above them are doing because they can't figure out, because they had honest, patriotic desires. They wanted to do what was right for their country, for the West, for what they thought was freedom. Okay, so I'm not knocking everybody who was a patriot or who was anti-Bolshevik, because there was a lot of right-wingers in Britain who were anti-Bolshevik. And so then when the Lloyd government comes out and supports the Bolsheviks, and then you get the betrayal, right, of the Tsar by the people in England, who's he related to, don't you think this is kind of mystifying? Why would this occur? I wonder why. Well, maybe it's because of the stuff that I talked about, that there's a higher level game that's being played that has an end goal that is actually public in all of these documents and writings, that's much bigger than a Cold War dispute between England and Russia, or what we call the Great Game. Okay, there's the first Great Game, and then there's the Cold War. The Great Game. You're familiar with this. I'm not even talking about conspiracy things. I'm talking about mainline history. So what we have then with the British Empire is a tragedy. Okay, I'm not saying that empires are inherently always evil. Byzantium was not inherently evil. Byzantium was the most Christian, most Orthodox empire in history. Russia, it would be, in at least in a Orthodox sense, the successor to Byzantium. And unfortunately, think something like the British Empire, there were probably many instances when there was such great opportunity. And there have been so many great people from England, so many great thinkers, writers, musicians, and even saints going back. So I'm not anti-Anglo, or I don't hate English. There's nothing like that. I come from British stock. I have an Anglo background. Okay, so I'm not a self-hating Anglo or whatever. That's crazy. But I'm going to talk about the reality of the tragedy of the British Empire in terms of its ideological descent, right? Not starting at the Reformation, the typical trad Catholic. Oh, it starts the Reformation. No, it goes back further than that, unfortunately. And so you get a downward decline, which is a tragedy. And I would agree with Tolkien, right? I mean, the purpose of the space trilogy and what Lewis and Tolkien talk about is that the real ancient England, what is Britannia, is something gone from the Middle Ages. And you could place the date, Norman invasion, whatever you want to put it as, right? The Franks, okay, whatever. This is why, for example, in the Space Trilogy in Volume 3, when they're wanting to fight against the technocracy, the Tavistock Institute, C.S. Lewis has Merlin like mystified. He says, let's get the king to help us. And they're all like, the king? You're not going to get any help out of the King of England. Are you kidding? They laugh at it. And it's Tolkien in the C.S. Lewis novel who is the representative, as Edwin Ransom, the true bloodline lineage of the king. He represents the real authentic, divinely appointed king, according to Lewis's characterization and allegory. So, not only am I not hating England or Britannia, I'm agreeing with the whole point of Lewis and Tolkien's works, dummies. And if you'd been listening to my materials and stuff, you would know that, because I've talked about this since we covered Lewis and Tolkien, since we lectured through the Space Trilogy. But all you people touting your own UK history don't even know that your greatest writers are saying the same thing as me. How dumb are you? I mean, I should be a self-hating Anglo because we're so dumb. How are you people so dumb? And then the response is, dumb American. Look at this dumb American. Dude, look at your fucking country. You are touting the people who have helped destroy your country. So you're mourning, it was a Stockholm Syndrome? What is wrong with you people? You're in a delusion where the very people who get up there and say that the poor people in England should just die and not have their heaters turned on in the winter. Yes, that's what the royals have said to you. Your leaders say that to you. They have said things like, far worse than let them eat cake. I'll let you go look up what they say about you. And you want to bitch at me on Twitter? You have a severe case of Stockholm Syndrome. And why are you intent on lauding and praising people who are genocidal, crazy, who have said many times over that they want everyone dead? Do you imagine that you're part of the elite because you're beige and trad in your mom's basement and you like the British monarchy? You're deluded, dude. That's called delusion. By the way, if you do want to support this stream, it's a spicy stream tonight. And I don't care if people are mad. I don't like you anymore. I used to like you, and now I don't like you anymore. I don't care. I don't care. Like the dude's telling me this today. I used to like you. Now I don't like you anymore. I don't care. I don't bloody care. Like I care some random Twitter person. I don't like you anymore. Okay. Now, do you have an argument why I'm supposed to actually like what you're telling me to like? Fugando! Fugando! They're taking the hobbits to Isengard! Yeah, exactly. If you do want to support the stream, you can do so via Super Chats. And if you're feeling so hot because I said a dirty word, I don't care. I don't care. You can get your feelings hurt. Because I'm tired of having dumb people talking shit to me and telling me they don't know any stuff they don't know anything about. Now, if you do come on and present a coherent case about the nuances of the history of the British Empire and the royal families, whatever that I don't know about, then I will gladly say, okay, I was wrong about that. I'm happy to say I'm wrong. It's not that big of a deal to be wrong. I don't care about being wrong. It's fine. You can come on here and correct me, critique me. I don't care. But when you don't know basic things in geopolitics and you're going to talk shit and act like an idiot, come on, dude. Come on. All you're doing is feeding the entertainment here. That's all you're doing. By the way, if you guys would, hit like and share. We got a couple people already over here requesting to debate. Uh-oh. I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to talk to you. Oi! You got a permission? You got a slip to do that debating there? I had to write you a fine. Ugh, nasty. Cold brew coffee. That stuff. I like cold brew coffee, but that one is gross. Tastes like engine oil or something. Burnt engine oil. It's like Twin Peaks up in here. I smell some burnt engine oil. We're about to walk into the in-between. A couple more points and then I'll open it up. So the British Empire, unfortunately, as we know, adopts this decline attitude of scientism, materialism, empiricism, right? It becomes the empiricist imperium, right? And in so doing, it not only undermines its own interests and itself, it then begins to foist this horrible ideological subversion upon the whole world. I'm speaking here of the Royal Society and its promotion of empiricism, atheism, etc. Let's see. I thought I had one of my books over here on the history of the Royal Society, but I may not have brought it over here. Anyway, I mentioned it today on Lord Voldemort's, if you missed it, but you can go watch that 4th hour, and I got into that. But the history of the Royal Society is where we get the preponderance of modern scientism. Right, the reason that all the universities teach scientism is primarily traced back to the Royal Society. The reason the whole world has adopted Darwinism is to trace it back to the Royal Society. And remember, Darwinism is not just a theory of biological life origins or origins or whatever. It also comes with all these other ideas like social Darwinism, which is a social theory, which is used by the Atlanticist power bloc to justify their approach. Now, who cares what the British Empire said, what they did? Well, so if we go back to the 1930s and 40s, there's a book that you could look at. It's called The Irregulars. And this is the history of the British intelligence networks. People like Roald Dahl, Noel Coward, Ian Fleming, William Stevenson, aka Intrepid, etc., etc., etc. They are the ones that convinced people in the American establishment to set up a private secret security apparatus to kind of be a secret inner government. And this was done under the auspices of it's absolutely necessary for World War II, right? And it was all British intelligence that set that up. And it marks the beginning of, now there was already internationalist institutions that existed prior to this, the CFR from the 20s, put in place at the behest of the Rockefellers. What do you think the Council on Foreign Relations is modeled on? I mean, again, has anybody listened to the lectures that we've done for 10 damn years? Modeled on the Royal Society roundtable groups, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Pratt House, Chatham House. I've been covering this for many years. This is Geopolitics 101. Those steering committees, Pratt House, Chatham House, CFR, Trilateral Commission, Institute for Pacific Relations, etc., a bunch of these, right, are put into place on the model of the Rhodes-Milner roundtable groups. Same people that set that up, same people setting up the OSS and CIA. Bill Donovan working with these people to set this up. The idea was, the stated plan of these people was, bring the American empire back under the influence of the older Pax Britannia idea. Reclaim our colonies, they said. Now, the point is not that I'm here saying, oh, we got to be American revolutionaries for the sake of being revolutionaries. I'm not saying that. Okay, I'm not that naive. But the ideological motivation of these people is not because of anything base and trad. These are super pragmatic social Darwinian people, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, in this power structure, who want to move America into being an engine of foreign power for this inner core power, aka the DEEPSTATE is what we call this today. Same group, same people, same power structure, exactly 100%. Going back to Royal Society, Rhodes, Rothschild, Milner, roundtable groups. Same stuff, same people, same power structure. Not identical to the British Empire, because that eventually kind of waned, but that transitioned into the Pax Americana, and the elite in the American ethos allied with these elites. And this is called, according to the archivist of these people, do you hear me, dummies? Did you hear me? Not a conspiracy person, the archivist of these people. The Anglo-American establishment, or the Atlanticist power block. This is Geopolitics 101. If you don't know this, you're dumb. And don't try to debate this if you don't know this. Don't call me names when you don't know this basic stuff. So this Anglo-American establishment is a private, inner, elite, corporate banking power structure that has adopted an ideology of Malthusian technocracy. And if you've watched the recent streams that Tristan and I did, then you know that we got into some of the documents that actually outline their policies, like State Department Memorandum 200 of Henry Kissinger. Why do you think David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger picked Zbigniew Brzezinski out to head the Trilateral Commission? It's because he wrote a book called The Technocratic Era, aka Between Two Ages, America in the Technocratic Era, Technotronic Era in the 70s. That got him the position of one of these steering committees, one of these non-elected bureaucratic power committees. So, if you don't know those things, then what you need to do is go back, listen to my lectures on Tragedy and Hope. Listen to my lectures on The Anglo-American Establishment by Quigley. This is a 1,300 page book that I lectured through in about 16 hours so that you don't have to read this horrible, boring nightmare that I read for you. This is not a conspiracy book. This is a book written by an apologist for this power structure. Person who was an archivist for the Council on Foreign Relations. He was Bill Clinton's mentor, Dr. Carroll Quigley, Georgetown University. I want to thank Dr. Carroll Quigley. He's such a great man. How dare you challenge him? How dare you? Okay, this is the book that used to be given out to CIA section chiefs in the 70s. When the CIA section chiefs didn't understand why they would be aiding and abetting communists, they would be given this book. Here, read this. Now you understand why we aid communists. It's a Cold War. Why are we aiding communists? Read this. Then you'll know. Okay. Now, in order to also understand the British Imperial perspective, it helps to understand Royal Society historians. Well, guess what? I've lectured through historians from the Royal Society's books that you guys may have forgotten about. I think 7-8 years ago, I lectured through Mark Curtis's 500 or 600 page book, Secret Affairs. Now, is this a conspiracy theorist? Oh, no, it's not. Mark Curtis is a former research fellow at the what? The Royal Institute for International Affairs, aka Chatham House. Did you hear this? Dummies coming at me, attacking me all the time. What does that say? Right there. Can you read that? Right there. Okay. Secret Affairs, Britain's collusion with radical Islam. So the people who want to tout the establishment in the UK for the last, 100 years. I mean, where do you think? Why do you think London is now an MOSQUE? It's your elites, dummy. That's why. It's a plan. That's why. Do you really think the world and these nations and these power blocks are all run by completely incompetent Joe Bidens? Do you think that the people who develop technology by which nanotech can be put into your bloodstream, do you think they're all incompetent Joe Bidens? Do you think that the people who can send a missile down your chimney are all incompetent Joe Bidens? Are you really that dumb and naive to think that Joe Biden actually runs the government? Or that your Boris whatever drunkard guy runs the British government? Those people are puppets. Those people are there as a layer of a firewall of idiocy to take the heat because they don't actually run anything. And if you had read Tragedy and Hope, you would know that Quigley says for about 100 years, no one has been actually consistently elected as U.S. president in their own organic power block or some sort of organic accidental election. Now, he was writing that in the 60s, okay? And you can debate Trump, whatever you want to debate. I don't care. But the point is that we're not run by dummies. There's an actual plan that consistently moves forward when you've read the people who run the planet. Their plan does not get derailed. Now, sometimes it does in terms of timing and, by 2020, we want to be here. By 2030, we want to be here. And not all those goals are met in those years. So sometimes things go wrong. But most of the time, they do not. And by the way, if you read the Mark Curtis book about how British intelligence has for a really long time utilized radical ISLAM, and you think, oh, that's the Brits. Oh, you think it's just them? Did you not hear me talking about 1979? Brzezinski? I would adjure you to read Robert Dreyfuss's book, Devil's Game, the history of American intelligence and radical ISLAM. Oh, guess what? It's the same. It's not any different. Now, in the 50s and 60s, interestingly, when I covered the Miles Copeland biography, Miles Copeland actually says, no, the old CIA plan, when it was to support the Baathists and so forth, was actually to have pan-Arab nationalism. They wanted that. They didn't like the idea of radical ISLAM. Then you got a new crop of people who decided, no, we're going to flip that, particularly Bush, Safari Club, their connections to Saudis. There's a whole book on this, the Safari Club. That represented a shift. Brzezinski, same idea. Let's use the base, Al-Q, and that was the co-opting usage of that group. They're called the Mujahideen. Go look up the pictures of the Mujahideen sitting there with Ronald Reagan in the White House. The freedom fighters. It's important that we support the freedom fighters in Afghanistan. Oh, you mean Al-Q? Go look up CBS news clip, Brzezinski, Mujahideen. And Brzezinski flies over there and he's telling all the Al-Q, this land over there is yours. God wants you to have that land. Famous clip. Does nobody remember this stuff? Okay. And yes, I know it's the Cold War. Well, it was the Cold War is what we had to do to beat the Soviets. I know all that. But the point is not that. The point is, wait a minute. So if they were the assets of three-letter agency, do you think that might have something to do with WTC 93 or WTC 01? Duh, I wonder. How do we understand this idea of imperialism and the British Empire's degeneracy? There's a great book on this that I recommend from two geopolitical writers. I've interviewed them in the past. It's called Afghanistan's Untold Story. Invisible History. It's about mystical imperialism. Now, why is it mystical imperialism? Well, because again, it harkens back to the idea of Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen, the weird occult Elizabethan Anglican idea that she will be a version of the Virgin Mary. I'm not joking. England is a mystical body to the Queen, the head. Hello? Does this make sense? Did you know that the Queen that just passed away was the head of the Anglican Church? The Queen is the head of the church? Does this sound weird to anybody? Hello? So the unfortunate, and I don't need you to tell me that, it's realpolitik. You know, we got to get dirty sometimes. I know all that, and I know all those arguments. But this is not just we're going to get dirty in geopolitics, and there might have to be assassinations. I'm aware of all that. This is a whole other level of Malthusianism, which says, based on a death cult ideology, that most people need to die. And I've been here covering Klaus and the World Economic Forum's books for years now, for millions of people on various outlets. Millions, yes, millions. Go look up the videos and see how they've gotten millions of views. Not on YouTube, but on Lord V. And it's all in those books. The same plan in Klaus's books that was in 100 years ago plans in H.G. Wells and the Royal Society people. No different. Plan's the same. And the Queen's husband, not just in one interview, in multiple interviews, has said, well, can't you guess? I would like to come back as a virus and kill most of the planet. And the interviewer is so dumb and out of it, she has no idea what he's talking about. Well, of course, what do you mean? What do you mean? I don't understand you. What do you mean you don't understand me? I'm saying I want everyone to die. Literally, go look up the interviews. And I don't know how many people on Twitter challenging me as if this doesn't exist. You can still find the clips if you look for them. And they say, oh, he just sort of says radical. Oh, he just says radical things. No, he's not. He's saying the same philosophy of all of these people for the last 100 or more years. It's not radical things. The Depop agenda has said the same things for a long time. And they still say it. I mean, I constantly put the clips up all the time. I share them on all the social medias. And people coming at me today as if none of this exists and it's all made up. It's pitiful. And you trads pretending that you're right-wing monarchists are just as nuts. Because you're not part of this class of people, dummies. You're not an inbred British elite. You might be equivalent to an inbred, but you're not an inbred British elite. No matter how much you may want to be. And yes, the Galton Darwin family kept it in the family. Did you know that? And Quigley talks about this, by the way, if you didn't know this. There's a whole chapter towards the end of Tragedy and Hope where he goes into education amongst the Anglo elite. I'm not joking. He actually discusses how they intentionally inculcate them with psychopathy. Part of the point of boarding schools is to separate the young child from motherly affections. I'm not kidding. So that they don't develop empathy. And elites have done this for a long time, if you didn't know this. This is a standard operating procedure for training people who will be state officials, leaders, etc. Now, did you know that in the history of British intelligence that they like to find orphans? Did you know that? Who is James Bond? He's an orphan. Why does that matter? Well, what does an orphan lack? Duh. Parents. Who becomes the surrogate parent to an orphan? Whoever raises him. Who raises James Bond and becomes his surrogate parent? The Queen, the government. Mum. Mum, nanny state. Mama government. Now, if you don't know about that, that's not my fault. That's a real thing. Profiling and picking out, recruiting people. Okay, intelligence assets recruit people. Agents, operatives, they recruit people, and they look for people who have certain weaknesses, certain proclivities, certain talents. A person who's an orphan, it's not just because you're an orphan, right? Please, sir, can I have some more? Oh, you make a good sport. No, you have to also have other qualities such as perhaps tendencies towards psychopathy, perhaps proclivities towards extreme intelligence, creativity. Who knows? So it's not just being an orphan, but I'm saying that those kinds of traits could be useful for recruitment. Now, why am I getting into all this? Because you have to understand how that apparatus works to understand why I would be so critical of the people that are touting this as if this is some kind of like trad thing. It just makes no sense to me, right? I mean, wickedness is ancient. Is wickedness based in trad because it's ancient? That's actually a fallacy, right? That's the anachronistic fallacy. Oh, it's old, so it's based in trad. Yeah, but so is sex. Is that based in trad too? Human sacrifice. Oh, based trad, human sacrifice. It's so old, dude. Yeah, well, Satan is ancient. He's not based in trad because he's ancient. Okay. Just because something comes from the state doesn't make it based in trad. Oh, monarchy, dude, based in trad. Oh, really? Do you know what most monarchs in the world today do and what they're up to? They're not based in trad, dummy. They're degenerate, co-opted, and wicked. So all I was trying to say today is that if you are blindly praising monarchy as if monarchy is inherently based, you're not even dumb. It's not. I mean, I would rather have DeSantis than Prince Charles. Prince Charles tells the old people that they should just die for the planet and freeze in winter rather than having heat. Did you know that they've said that? It was either him or the Duke of Edinburgh, one of them two. They're both pretty bad. And by the way, Prince Charles has had a phase where he said he's every religion. He said he's Sufi. He said he's Wahhabi. He said he's Anglican. He said he's into Orthodoxy. That's just what politicians do. Okay, I don't know if you naive people haven't figured this out. He's not an Orthodox person. You can't be a antinatalist Malthusian and Orthodox. Did you not know that, people? Do you not know what a photo op is? Okay, so him getting an icon does not mean he's a secret Orthodox. And by the way, I actually think it was pretty genius when Sneck was trolling people with that, right? But there were people that were taking that seriously, like, oh, he's surprising, we've got a trade Orthodox, we've got a trade Orthodox king about to come in. Orthodox about to take over England. Really? Did you see Prince Charles with Klaus? They did a whole podcast. I think so. I think I'm remembering years ago, like 2020, they did like a little audio podcast. I mean, you can't be a Malthusian and Orthodox. Duh. How dumb are you people? And what's the history of British Imperial intrigue? Well, there's a great book written by an academic, not a conspiracy theorist. It's called MI6. Inside the Covert World of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service. Right? On Her Majesty's secret service. At Her Majesty's secret request. Oops, what? Now, Stephen Dorrell gets pretty deep. And this is a difficult book. It's not an easy read. It's a massive behemoth of a book. But there's other books you could read that are even more simple in their approach to this question that I've interviewed, like Dr. Richard Spence, not Dr. Richard Spence, a different one. And it's called Secret Agent 666. Aleister Crowley, British intelligence and the occult. That'll give you a good idea of what kind of intelligence agency we're talking about here, for all you naive, dumb people out there. Now, when I was doing my grad work, I got pretty deep into this because I found this whole thing with Ian Fleming and James Bond and all this fascinating. And a lot of the British intelligence people, at Her Majesty's request, were also fascinated by and into Satanism. Look up the history of Maxwell Knight, who is part of the basis for M, Bond's handler. We could also go to mainline works like Craig Cable's book, Ian Fleming's Secret War, because, by the way, I actually kind of think Ian Fleming wasn't that bad, believe it or not. Because did you know that Moonraker is about the Malthusian attitude amongst many of the British elite? Because of what? Ever heard of paperclip, dummies? Paperclip. Craig Cable has a whole book, a whole chapter on paperclip. And that's why Ian Fleming put Hugo Drax as the bad guy in Moonraker. But the problem is that it's deeper than Hugo Drax and the Germans. Because as Quigley notes, the appeasement plan itself was concocted by the British elites to get Tiny Mustache Man to do what he did. In other words, they wanted Tiny Mustache Man to do what he did, to kick off the war. And not just that, but 2 other separate books that I just got a hold of, that I have not even dove into yet, but I'm kind of blown away that I found these books. 2 separate British intelligence writers writing about the lies and scammery of intelligence work. One of them, James Rusbridger's book, The Intelligence Game. Guess what he says about the Bolsheviks? Oh, yes. That couldn't have happened without elite British establishment support. Oh, and then guess what? Another famous British spy. Bruce Lockhart. Memoirs of a British Agent. Guess what he says? Oh, Bolshevism wouldn't have happened in Russia if it had not had elite British support. Oh, and what did we just see from Anthony Sutton? The page that I just shared again today on Twitter. Without Lord Milner and his co-opting of the British government, in terms of the public officials like the Lloyd George flipped to support the Bolsheviks at the behest of Lord Milner and the Fabians. Again, people coming at me trying to debate me. You don't know what Fabians are. Don't try to debate me. Why are you arguing with me about stuff you have no knowledge of? And if you'd known about the Fabians, you'd know what I'm talking about. And it wouldn't sound crazy. It wouldn't sound weird. And it doesn't matter that there's a fake left wing and a fake right wing of the elites amongst the Brits, because they both support the Malthusian technocratic Great Reset agenda openly. Openly. Let's see if there's... Well, I won't get into this because this might be a little too hot and heavy. But does anybody remember Diana? Hello. Greg Research did a great video on Diana. Gordon Thomas has a chapter in a book that I can't talk about. Famous intelligence analyst Gordon Thomas has a chapter on Diana. Hello. I interviewed one of the former famous British spies who also divulged the whole Diana thing about 10 years ago. So if you're going to debate me, first of all, have you interviewed any famous British spies? If you're going to debate with me, you're going to argue with me, tell me who you've interviewed. Who did you get a first-hand account from? My interview is still up. You can still go get it. And she talked, I can't remember if we talked about, I know we talked about Gaddafi and what they wanted to do with him. And I know we talked about Ben Laden and Al Q. I can't remember if we got into Diana, but she talks about Diana in other interviews. And it's in the Greg Reese video, if you want to go watch Greg Reese's excellent video. So again, why are you trying to come at me when you don't know what you're talking about? Learn what you're talking about before you try to come at me. All right, let's open it up because I've talked for a long time. I've got a whole bunch more books over here, by the way. I can go even deeper. I can go crazy deep if you want. Did you know the mainline people? Mainline people. So Ben McIntyre wrote the Operation Mincemeat book, which they just made the movie into, with Benedict Cumberbatch. He's in, I'm pretty sure he's in the Operation. He's basically in every British movie. So we'll just say he's in it, whether he's in it or not, because he's basically in every one of them. Well, Ben McIntyre also wrote another history of James Bond. And guess what he gets into? All of the Crowley stuff. He has a whole chapter on Crowley in here. And by the way, Ian Fleming makes him a villain. So the reason I'm bringing up the Crowley stuff is that you understand that this links the British intelligence establishment directly to satanic networks. So you want to say that's crazy? It's a fact. So whether you think it's true or false doesn't matter because it's actually a fact. Right? There's a whole chapter on multiple Bond villains based on Crowley. Le Chiffre and Blofeld are both based on Aleister Crowley. Mainline historical research. Here's your Blofeld in the mainline Ben McIntyre book. See that? Blofeld? Well, I wonder who Blofeld's based on. Oh, I wonder. Ooh. This dude. And why would he be based on that dude? Because, as Dr. Richard Spence wrote in his book years ago, British intelligence had a keen interest in utilizing the most famous Satanists of the 20th century and satanic cults. And in fact, Dr. Spence even goes deeper by pointing out that it's entirely possible that Crowley's famous drug diary is what influenced Huxley and the Tavistock Institute to begin the ideas of what would become basically the MK Ultra project. That's speculative, that's a theory, but it does make sense given that Crowley was experimenting with drugs on people in terms of mind control as a cult leader. So I know this topic because I've done grad work on it. I don't know everything about this topic, but I know this topic. And so if you're going to come at me and debate me on this, you better know what you're talking about. All right. It's open forum. It's opened up. You want to debate monarchy. You want to debate British tradition. You want to debate Anglicanism. You want to debate the history of Freemasonry in England. Whatever relates to the topic listed. It says debate. If you do slam poetry, I'm going to ban you right away. It's not poetry hour. In fact, it's never poetry hour on my channel. Ever. And never will be. Says at the top, debate. Debate. Unfortunately, most of the time it's not debate. It's debate, isn't it? But maybe we'll get a curveball. Maybe we'll get a nice surprise today. Now, many more books I could go into. A lot more books we could go into here. But I think you guys get the point. I wish I could go into the Gordon Thomas book, but that's too hot, too spicy over here. People lose their mind. People melt, start crying if I go into that book. But he has actually a pretty key chapter that I've never seen anybody else cover on Diana. And he gets into how that operation was most likely done. And he has a pretty good argument. All right, so the way this works is you can have the floor. You can make whatever argument you want. If you want to defend the Windsors, who, by the way, they're not British, right? They're Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Okay, they descend from other places, Germanic, Transylvanian. So I don't know where people get, oh, so I have to defend my lineage, my tradition, my people. They're not your people, dummy. What are you talking about? I'd be like, or defend the Norman invasion. The Normans are more people. Okay, whatever, dude. If you come on, you got to make arguments. That's the way it works. If you don't make arguments, you're going to immediately be booted out, and we won't ever talk again. Big Chief, what's up? You guys remember to unmute.
Hello.
What's up, Big Chief?
What's up?
Big
So
Chief.
I was thinking about monarchy, dude.
Okay.
And monarchy, you know, it's a really big thing, having a person live forever, basically.
Live forever? They don't live forever.
I mean,
what do you mean?
Well, not live forever. I don't mean literally. I mean,
you mean rule for their whole life, or what do you mean?
Yeah, rule for their whole life, yeah. Wasn't the Tsar like a relative or cousin of the royal family in Great Britain?
Yes, and I retweeted the documentary that somebody on Twitter shared today, where it goes into this BBC documentary, goes into the history of the cousins in the UK who sold them out.
Dang.
Yeah.
Think you know of Pella. Anyway.
So in other words, it's really that also further is an attestation to the Sutton thesis in regard to Lord Milner. And by the way, there's another book I'm about to buy called The Milner-Fabian Conspiracy, which is again talking about the same stuff.
Right. That's cool. I'll read it.
What's up, dude?
What if I don't want to just throw around like random hypotheticals, but I mean like if something happens inside of America, like what if like a monarchy rises inside of America? Like how would that, like not like a or whatever else like that, like in realistic terms, it's like you got Texas and Florida.
I don't think that is realistic. I'm not trying to shoot down your dreams, and I'm sure everybody thinks that would be great and nice, but I just don't think any of that's cool. None of that's realistic. Not in this country. I mean, the whole country is birthed out of anti-monarchy, right? Exactly. So the only way that there would ever be a monarchy in America would be when America collapses, right? So, but the other thing too is that as Orthodox, it's not our goal and our mission to go out and establish the right form of government. That's not what we do. That's the attitude of the trads, right? That's what they do. And it just doesn't work. I mean, the Roman Empire was not converted by, the apostles and the Christians of the first 300 years going out and trying to argue and convince the emperor to convert and enforce it. It took 3 centuries of martyrs, and that's how the Roman Empire converted, not through top down. It's possible that a ruler could convert. That does happen in some cases, but that's not typically how it goes on. So we're not trad cats. We don't try to do this. Let's base politically take over, bro. I don't think that works.
Exactly.
It has it backwards. So when the people convert, then naturally what flows is some form of an orthodox government, but not the other way around. That's what leads to all this confusion, and it's a form of idolatry, right? And the same people who are doing the like based monarchy, UK monarchy, are also it's a form of idolatry. Why is it? Why are you? I mean, should we tout the iconoclast emperors because they were emperors? Whoa, based emperors, yeah, awesome, yeah, but they persecute the church and enforce heresy.
Right.
Makes no sense.
I don't even think that would be natural having it from top down anyway. I mean, like, maybe I'm just a silly American, but I mean, like, it makes more sense to have everybody along on board with whatever instead of having the top down. Hey, I want to brainwash you. You better follow along.
Well, it's in the minor prophets that altar comes first, not throne, right? So yeah, we want to have throne and altar, but to put throne first is a form of idolatry, and it's critiqued and rejected in the prophets. All right, so good questions, Big Chief. Let's see who's up next. Lamp by the Sea. What's up, dude? Unmute, dude.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Good evening. I have one thing to say to support your claim that the elites are able to eventually unseat monarchies, and then one thing that's pro-monarchy in a broad sense. The first is that I'm descended from Henry Pomeroy Davidson. He's my great-great-grandfather. He founded the Federal Reserve back in 1913. But then later, interestingly enough, to your Anglo-American question, he also founded and chaired the International Red Cross during World War I. But then when he tried to found a more nationalized version of the Red Cross, he was basically killed by the IRC leadership in Geneva in the mid-20s.
By the what leadership?
The International Red Cross leadership operating from Geneva.
Wow, that's crazy.
There's basically like a national versus international power play that's going on in the early 1920s.
Well, the Red Cross, according to Sutton, was one of the key fronts for supporting the Bolsheviks.
Absolutely. And then his son later became director of personnel for the CIA and was Skull and Bones and all that.
Wow.
So I just thought it would be an interesting kind of lend credence to your claim. But
I recognize your name, Lamp by the Sea, because you've come on the Twitter Spaces before, so I recall some of our previous chats.
Sure. So I guess my point about the monarchy is, I guess every successful democracy has some kind of leader that ends up being a monarch, whether that's Franco or that's FDR or that's Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. The strongest leader in a democracy will reign for 20 years, essentially assuming monarchical status. But then the monarchs themselves get replaced and subverted by financial elites. And I like how you tied it all the way from the Reformation through the Reformation and just kind of going along through the English Civil War to the present day. I mean, it's very obvious that a financial elite that relies on a strong kind of power base can obviously supplant any monarchy. So I guess when I look at a successful monarchy or a successful democracy that has basically monarchical leaders, they have much stronger patron-client relationships than some other systems of government around them. And so that's essentially, I think, the key to holding power. So I guess that would be my argument is, Charles I and Charles II disbanded Parliament. And we'll see if Charles III now does the same. So I guess that would be my pro-monarchy argument. You're going to have basically weak leaders like the Merovingian kings that are then replaced by Charlemagne. So essentially that would be my monarchist argument.
Yeah, well, so Lewis said the same thing today to me too. One of our friends from Discord, and we we recorded a video today, me and him and Kai, critiquing Islam, and afterwards we were talking about that, and Lewis said something similar about what will his attitude be towards Parliament. Yeah, good question. I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to. My critique is not of monarchy. As everybody knows, I think monarchy is the best form of government. But I don't think that Saxe-Coburg-Gotha-Windsor family has a history of supporting good causes. So that's my critique, is that, really evil leaders, I don't understand why we would praise it. To me, it's no different than like an iconoclast emperor who's crazy. And like, oh, what's our attitude towards him? Well, he was still an emperor, so he's like beige and triad. It doesn't make any sense to me. So that was my point today, but that angered a lot of people. But great points there, Lamp by the Sea. Let's see. Erickson report. What's up, Erickson? You gotta unmute, dude.
Yeah, I just heard you say that monarchy was the best form of government. Could you tell me why you believe that?
Well, there's a lot of practical reasons, but I think number one, it's the biblical view. It's the view that has developed in the history of the church for 2,000 years. And in the practical way, I would say that if you think about the motivations of a politician, I mean, a politician is basically beholden to self-interests or to private interess, and whoever gets him elected. He has no loyalty to the people in general or to the people group, and so he's only loyal to those select interests. But a monarch is at least intended to be raised to be a statesman, and he's at the behest of the people. And typically monarchs who don't do that well sometimes end up with their head cut off. So the motivations of a monarch to do what's in the public interest are stronger than the motivations of a 4-year term elected politician who goes there basically just to fill his own pockets. So those are some of the practical reasons why. And history of monarchs amazingly has produced more freedom and more time off and more normal life than these supposed democratic republics. We work crazy amounts of time in democratic republics. We are basically slaves to the state. And if you look at a medieval French peasant, they had much more free time. They had much more of a normal organic life than people in our society. So I'm not trying to say, oh, we got to have a Middle Ages world where we don't have dentists and we don't have refrigerators. That's not the point. But I would agree with somebody like Hoppe, who basically points out that democratic republics have far higher taxation and burdens than the average medieval peasant had.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there's never been a pure democracy tried in the history of the world that I know of. And so I would say to you that a pure democracy would work much better than a monarchy.
Well, how would you know it would work better if it's never been tried, according to your own admission?
Because it gives the people the power.
But it's never been tried.
You're giving one person the power. I'm giving all the people the power.
Okay, how can all the people have the power? I mean, that seems to be chaos. It doesn't even make any sense. Do you think everybody in society is equally gifted?
Yeah, I have faith in people, and I think they'll do the right thing.
Okay.
They get to vote on everything. They run it. You
Right.
have one person running
Right.
it.
Yeah, sure. All right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's move on. Anybody else? It's open forum, so if you want to make your arguments, I'm sorry, but not everybody in a society has the same gifts, talents, and abilities. That's completely. I mean, I can't even respond to that. I'm sorry. I'm not been trying to be mean to you, but we're gonna move on. Jason, I can't read your last name. What's up, Jason? I think babies should vote. We should have babies. Babies have the exact same qualities, wisdom, knowledge as PhDs. I think children should have an equal say as their parents. And everything should be put to a vote. Jason, you got to unmute, dude.
Got it. Thanks,
What's up, man?
Hey, yeah, I think babies should vote too. I think the world would be perfect if babies voted.
Well, I have faith in babies, as I do in every human being. And a child shall lead them. A child shall lead. See, the Bible's predicting that we'll have we'll have the childocracy. Let's give teen. What if we had a teen government, dude? Teen power, teen government. Yeah. Everybody's equal, dude.
Why not?
Everybody's equal.
Anyway,
Teen
I wanted to
government.
ask you,
Yeah.
Do you think that the royals are more powerful than the Rothschilds?
Seems to be the other way around. So, seems like the royals are allowed to be royals because they. I mean, let's think about the Masonic revolutions. Okay, Masonic revolutions since the 1700s and into the 1800s overthrew all the monarchies. Okay, monarchies are gone. Oh, but a handful are allowed to remain, and typically the British monarchy is allowed to remain and have this very wealthy, very powerful status. I don't think they run the world, but I think they do have a lot of wealth and a lot of power. I mean, again, we could look into, their relationship to British intelligence. Read the Stephen Dorrell book, which I've talked about many times for many years. Look at the Diana event, what went down there. I mean, clearly they have a lot of power. She can, basically shut down, the Canadian government if she wants to in her commonwealths. So, but exactly what the relationship is between the Queen and, higher level families, I'm not exactly sure, but they're all pretty close up there to the top of the pyramid, in my view.
Yeah, it kind of made sense to me too. The only other thing I wanted to ask you is like the Freemasons. What is your whole? I haven't really gotten into all your work, but what is your thoughts on what they actually are? I mean, they like to say they're just a group to make better men, but why would you have an oath of secrecy on pain of death? It makes no sense to me.
Well, I mean, they're a international organization that for a long time, as I said earlier in this talk, was the intelligence network of the British Empire. That's mainline history. That's not a conspiracy theorist. That's mainline history. I don't know if they still have that role today because we don't live in the British Empire. We live in the Pax Americana. But I'm sure there's still some of those old boy networks, as they're called, that do have those connections and those relations to the Royal Society and so forth. So I think that at a pragmatic power level, that's what they do. I think there are different fringe factions and groups amongst them that are into really dark stuff. Maybe not all of them, but you can read more. You can read, or Crowley, these kinds of people. You can read the Morals and Dogma, and Albert Pike basically makes it into a apparatus for controlling the masses that utilizes a syncretic approach to religion. So he says that Masonry is the ancient mysteries of all the ancient mystery schools into one package deal. So it's all of those things in my view. I don't think the Masons are that powerful anymore, not like they were in the height of the British Empire. A good movie that actually exposes this is The Man Who Would Be King, the movie with Sean Connery and Michael Caine. If you watch that, you will see them as Freemasons basically outdoing their Masonic hoodwink, which they're just basically con men. But by the way, why don't we just say that Jimmy Savile? Why don't we just say Jimmy Savile should be the king and the ruler? Right? Let's make him the ruler. He was a great, wonderful man, friend of, confidant to the elites in the UK. Friend and confidant to many Satanists and serial killers, BFF with, I'm sure he's a great man. We should definitely trust these people. Good questions. Let's see. Who's up next? Stephen. We know and we recognize. You better recognize. What's up, Stephen? I know this man right here. You got to unmute.
Hey, what's up, Jay?
Hey, what's up, dude?
Hey, man. I just had to say about Queen Elizabeth that, she's the head of the Anglican Church, and I'm not an Anglican myself, but, the Anglican Church is arguably the most converged of all of the denominations currently. So I don't know. I'm not going to say whether she was actually devout or not, but that is her legacy, is the complete convergence of the Anglican Church.
Absolutely. And a lot of people seem to have forgotten this. They're focusing on, the civil state arena of this and forgetting that this was a woman head of the church or so-called church. Has everybody forgotten this, right? Like, this is the head of a sect. Okay. Maybe that's significant.
Yeah, I actually found out recently that I'm allegedly the bastard descendant of King Henry VIII. So I guess I apologize on behalf of England and the Anglican Church.
Well, doesn't it come up in Johnny English? Like, don't they think for a while that Mr. Bean is supposed to be like isn't he going to be like, he's going to be like the real descendant to the throne? There was some movie where it's like some goofy, or is it King Ralph, right? It's like John Goodman is King Ralph, and he's like he's the real descendant. So maybe you could be like John Goodman and be like King Ralph.
Yeah, it'd be a funny movie because there's like hundreds of thousands of claimants that are descended from that bastard line. So that'd be a funny actual Game of Thrones where you have hundreds of thousands of people battling each other to rule England.
Winter's coming, dude.
Absolutely. Anyways, that's all I had to say. Other than her, love of Jimmy Savile, and destroying the Anglican Church and allowing England to be invaded, that's my thoughts. I enjoy the Queen, though. From what I saw, that was fun.
You enjoy Queen, Freddie Mercury? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
We are the champion. I'm just joking.
Yeah, sorry, The Crown. I guess I'm not that big of a fan, unfortunately. My wife reminded me of the actual name of the show.
Interesting. Yeah, great points, Stephen. Thank you so much. Glad to see you chiming in. He's been lurking. He been lurking in the background for a little while. Now he speaked it up. Follow Christ. What's up, dude? You got to unmute, by the way.
Oh, hello. Hi, Jay. I just recently found out about you, and I think you're very good at what you do, and you're funny also.
Thank you.
You're
A girl on Instagram said I'm not funny today. You take that, girl on Instagram. I am funny. That dude proved it. Shut your mouth.
And I hope that you continue discerning well, and God bless you.
Thanks.
I also agree with you that that monarchy historically has been the best form of government, and it's also the biblical view. But what do you think about like today, when they, you know, the evil ones, are like diluting nations and trying to dilute everything that's normal and good? And do you think monarchy is still possible when a king is trying to rule just a bunch of individual people rather than a nation that has common values? And and are we only, like, I believe we're only going to be saved by common values, by Christ, you know?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. Like, there's not like a political solution to our problems today. That doesn't mean I'm telling people that they can't be involved in local politics or whatever. But like, everybody's attitude is, oh, if we just elect the right dude, like, Washington is not going to save your local city and state. And no, I mean, there is validity in people being involved in local politics if they want to. I don't do politics really. That's up to them if they want to do that. But no, politics is not going to be a solution, even though it does matter. But I've watched and followed politics since I was, 18, and it's always the same stuff. And I'm not trying to be overly negative or black-pilled, because people can do things on a local level, but I think you're right that you can't beat globalism as it is now with a based nation state or a based king, right? Because even any one nation state doesn't have the power or the ability to combat an international global oligarchy and something like the World Economic Forum. So I don't know what the answer is, other than to tell people to go for orthodoxy and flee for the hills or something. I don't know. Like, make sure your family and your friends are good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I don't know about politics. I don't know about that.
Live out the faith more than anything.
Well, that will actually bring more people in the right direction than, in my view, than direct national political action. Maybe there's people who can pull off national. I don't know. I'm not politically savvy enough to know what can and can't be accomplished in politics.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So I'm not American, as you can clearly hear, but I think the only thing that's going to save America, because it seems like there are some people that are hell bent on destroying America.
I do. Yeah, that's definitely true. Sure. Yeah. I mean, they say that about, Klaus, Gil Bates, they're all up there basically saying that all the time. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
I got to move on because I've got some super chats and I'm over here sweating. So I can't, we already did I did 1 hour of Lord Voldemort. We did 2-hour interview on Islam. We've been going here for almost 2 hours, so that's like 5-6 hours of talking. I'll start to turn into mush. Turbo Nate, what's up, dude? Turbo Nate.
Hey, Jay. So, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. So on the topic of monarchy, I would agree that monarchy is the best form of government. And one of the arguments is just that, it's supported by the Bible and the Orthodox Church. But getting to that point, Protestants will try and argue that, monarchy was not original intended form.
Yeah,
of
but this is a
government
really
for Israel.
yeah, but this is
Have
a
you
low
heard that?
this is a really low IQ argument because number one,
Yeah,
what is
that's
Genesis?
what I'm asking about.
What is right? So Genesis 49 predicts that the royal scepter will not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. Messianic prophecy predicting the royal scepter. So kingship was already predicted in Genesis 49 for Israel. And it even predicts Judah, David, as the royal line. Now, if you read Deuteronomy, Moses talks about the laws for kings. There's laws for kings in Moses. This is all prior to the events of Samuel. So when Samuel is telling the Israelites that they have not rejected him, but they've rejected God, God tells that to Samuel. The basis is not because monarchy is inherently evil. The basis is because they wanted a king like the nations around them. In fact, it even says in Judges that the people were lost in chaos and they were immersed in relativism. It says it multiple times in the book of Judges because there was no king in Israel. So Judges is a pro-monarchy book. Do people not know this? And by the way, the whole history of Protestantism is from monarchs. The kings are the ones that supported the national churches of the reformers. So they don't even know that. Luther couldn't have even been successful had he not had the support of the German princes. So their own history is bound up with monarchy. So that's more of an evangelical idea, not a classical Protestant idea.
Sure. Yeah, that was just my question. Well, I guess then what is the justification again for why they had the judges in the first place? I'm drawing a blank.
So they weren't unified yet in the Promised Land to have a setting to where it was appropriate to have the king. So the prophecies prophecies of the king relate to when they come to the Promised Land, when they get all that stuff set up. Then the king comes about, and so Saul is chosen by God, right? David is chosen by God, and it was again prophesied in Genesis 49. So it's not monarchy itself, it's the fact that if you remember how the pagans operated, right? It even says in the text, like, we want a king who rides out in battle before us like the pagans. Their whole reasoning is to have a king like the pagans. And if you read the New Testament, my view in terms of typology, that because I just finished reading through 1 Samuel, when Samuel says when God says through Samuel, you've not rejected Samuel, but you've rejected God as being king. That's a prophecy of Christ in my view. They don't want Christ as their king. That's the prophecy there that many Protestants miss because they don't understand typology.
Perfect. That answers my question.
Yeah. So it has nothing to do with like being against monarchy. In fact, it's pro-monarchy. Benedict, what's up, dude? Benedict Cumberbatch, what's up, dude? Operation Mincemeat, shout out.
Hey.
What's up, man?
Hey, I got a few questions, but I'll try and make it quick.
Sure.
So on topic today, we've got obviously the Queen and the real power structure and stuff, and the technocrats. And I was wondering if, we're told to pray for our enemies.
Sure.
And I was wondering if we, if the technocrats and if they're the same thing, because they're pretty bad. So.
No, we absolutely should pray for our enemies. In fact, in the liturgy, we pray for kings, queens, those in authority, even if they're wicked. So let's not miss. I'm not saying you're saying this, but some of the people who got mad at me today, I'm not saying that we don't pray for people when they pass away or that we don't wish them well, but both things are true, right? Proverbs 11, which I shared today as well, talks about how the righteous rejoice when the wicked die, right? Sin. So Proverbs says that sin is a disgrace to any people, to any nation. So when a nation becomes wicked and the rulers become wicked, it's a disgrace. And when wicked rulers die, both things can be true. I can be happy that we have been freed from a wicked ruler, and at the same time, I'm not necessarily wishing evil upon a wicked ruler. I'm sad that they chose that route. I mean, what was I just saying tonight? The history of the British Empire is a tragedy. I'm not happy. I'm from Anglo stock, right? I'm not happy about that, but that's a fact. So in the same way, both things can be true, just like imprecatory prayers. You know, in the Orthodox prayers, we still have imprecatory prayer. Russian prayer books have prayers against the Hagarites, the Hagarites. That's Hagar. That's the Muslims. It prays for the victory of Orthodox princes against the Muslims. We do still pray imprecatory prayers, and guess what? An imprecatory prayer can exist at the same time as praying for your enemies. Both of those things can be true. A lot of people can't grasp this. They get like really either or, like, praying for enemies means that I can't have self-defense and I have to just be a total C-U-C-K. No, that's not what it means. Both things are true, okay? Loving and praying for your enemies is just as much true as it is that you should defend your people and stand up for the weak.
So it's a both and, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
And the left, they make it either or, and everything is about, oh, you gotta be a pacifist, and you got to like surrender to everyone and let everybody RAPE you, and you should just be a doormat, let everyone walk on you because that's what Jesus does. That's how those people are. Totally ridiculous. No similarity to historical Christianity at all.
And that's the attitude I felt was around when I was Protestant.
Oh yeah, totally. Absolutely. Which is weird because the history of Protestantism is actually Protestants going to war with each other and killing each other, which so it's really like, oh, you don't believe in baptism? Let's drown you. Okay. I'm serious.
I agree. And to segue as well, me being Protestant, I had like a past belief that when questioned about like what my political stances were and stuff, I was more inclined to just say that I don't think there is any solution to our problems except, Christ coming back or something like that. But then when I got introduced to Orthodoxy, I realized that there was a history of a continuous history of monarchy, and now I see that. But I just want to make it clear with you to clarify that you're not saying that it, because mostly 99% of the time when we talk about these positions like libertarian, anarchism, or whatever, they're always looking at it from a kind of a utopian kind of way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was rejecting. Like, but there's no such thing. We're not going to get that unless
right.
through Christ. So obviously we're not saying that in terms of Orthodox monarchy, right?
No, not at all. I mean, again, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we will be able to save Western civilization. I mean, I think that Orthodoxy could save Western civilization. I don't know if that will happen. I don't know if things are going to get worse and we're going to have a complete collapse and go into the Great Reset full bore. I don't know. I hope not. That's going to be bad for everybody. But that might be what has to happen to move into a better situation where nations start returning to authentic Christianity, right? That might be what I don't know. I don't know where we're going. I don't know if it's the end of the world. It could be. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's not our position to speculate really as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, didn't the left and right terminology come from the French Revolution?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I thought I was right about that.
Yeah, so when they set up the provisional government in the tennis court, they had a provision. I'm not joking, it's literally a tennis court. They had a left side bleachers and right side. And so you had the Girondins on the right side who believed in like private property. And you had the Jacobins on the left, the total Illuminati communist people. This was the provisional government, and this is where we get right and left from.
Yeah. Okay. I also just wanted to add real quick that when we talk about monarchy or just power in general, whether it be leadership, captaincy or whatever, that in and of itself is not a bad thing as what libertarians would see. It's the misuse of it, so they've got the wrong metaphysic.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
So
It's
you know,
the
I mean,
misuse of it.
right. So God delegates to the two leaders amongst men to be powers and principalities, just like there's powers and principalities of the angelic domain. There's also hierarchy amongst men to have powers and principalities and leaders, right? Scripture says many times over that the king is there by God's providence, by God's decree. In Romans 13, right, Paul is writing about, in my view, Nero, and he's saying, even though Nero's evil, he's still there providentially as God's appointed. The Greek there is it's diakonos. So Nero, being evil, is still a providential leader, just like if you read the book of Daniel, God and Daniel speak of Nebuchadnezzar that way, in divine providence, even though he's evil, right? That doesn't mean that that's ideal, but they're still in some way providentially there. I would say that that's not what we're shooting for. We don't want a giant pagan empire. We want there to be Christian rulers, but only when there's a majority Christian society who wants that, right? We don't force that on people. So, but I do think people misunderstand and misuse Romans 13 as if this is some sort of carte blanche that like any ruler is like can do anything, and it's like a that's been misused for autocracy, which I don't think is true.
Yeah. So the point is that power or governance in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's just the misuse of it. It can be a good thing if ordained by a God.
Yeah, I mean, just read the book of Proverbs, and you have all kinds of advice to kings.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, great points there. Yeah, I'm gonna move on, but thanks, man. Great points. Mumbling bearded something freak. What's up, dude? That's a cool name. Mumbling bearded freak. What's up, dude? Did he leave? Benjamin. What's up, Benjamin? You gotta unmute.
Yo, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
What's up, Jay? I don't really have a debate. I'm just trying to kind of figure out this power structure that seems everyone's kind of agreeing on in this kind of genre of talk. But so like, I guess we all kind of agree there is like a top of the pyramid. Like, what specifically do you think that's the British Empire, or is that?
The British Empire doesn't exist anymore, so no, it's not at the top of the pyramid. But
the Commonwealth, I guess, would be their range of influence.
If you read The Anglo-American Establishment by Quigley, he will actually name for you the eye of the pyramid and the people around the eye in the book.
Okay.
And I've covered that. You can go watch my lectures on that.
Book.
I've go watch my lectures, and you want me to tell you the page where he tells you the eye of the pyramid, the illuminate, confirm, the real illuminate. Somewhere there's a list. Okay, here it is, right here, page 39. The Society of the Elect and the Helpers. There you go. That's the real illuminate, confirm, back in 1890. There you go. Where's the real illuminate, confirm? It's not Aleister Crowley. It's not Jay-Z. It's not who else is the quote Illuminati? I don't know. Remember years ago you used to get these comments on your blogs, and it was like, hello friend from Nigeria, want to initiate to Illuminati, just send $600 to this and you will get free entrance to Illuminati. Want girls, want Lamborghini, want elite lifestyle, very luxurious, send $600 Nigerian email. Literally, you would get these comments. So that's not the real Illuminati. Okay. It's not, who else? It's not Aleister Crowley. It's not Beyonce. It's not Katy Perry. Okay. It's this pyramid listed on page 39 of this book in 1890. That's it. Guys, I want to remind you, we got a lot of lack when it comes to toxic masculinity. I want to see more toxic masculinity out there in the swaths of the audiences that I see. We just did a live event in Orlando, and I am happy to say that I saw and was radiated by high levels of toxic masculinity in the audience. Literally. It was it was raining men, honey. It was raining men. It was so toxic in there. Toxic masculinity going nuts. Why? Because of Chalk.com, baby. The show sponsor. The best company in the world, probably. And what do they have? They have supplements that will help you be more toxically masculine. Supplements such as the Irish Moss, which Jamie takes to help regulate her hormonals. That's hard to say. Her Hermione's. For you get that Hermione balance. Like Harry H. Potter over there, balancing out them Hermione's hormones. You get the She Legit, which is totally too legit to quit. That will help you with mental focus, mental clarity in reading of the books. You got that Tomcat Elite. If you're a dude, you want to boost that testosterone. Get that Tomcat 100. Proven in peer-reviewed studies to boost testosterone. Guess what? 50% off. Also, the daily. Maybe you don't want none of that. You just want overall supplementation. We have nutrient-deficient diets in the West, and Chalk.com is there to help that problem. How do we get the nutrients that we need when our soils are depleted, when our food is weird, creepy, Frankenstein, GMO stuff? Well, that's what Chalk is there to help with. And you go to Chalk.com, very simple process. CHOQ.com. Put in the promo code J50, JAY50, JAY50. You will get 50% off everything in the store. That's crazy. Crazy level discounts, right? Well, if you want something better than that, you can actually set up recurring subscriptions at Chalk.com where you put in J53 Life, that's J53LIFE, and you get 53% off for any recurring subscriptions, right? Everybody's seen Jeffrey Bezos over there on his little Amazon outlet, his little startup over there, you might have heard of it, called Amazon. He does a recurring thing. Well, guess what? Chalk.com allows that as well. We got the Bezos model going where there's recurring subscriptions, so you don't have to put all that info back in. That's boring and annoying. Well, just set up the recurring subscriptions. They got you covered. You're going to have that hot Chalk supplement in your inbox, in your mailbox, your MALE box, your toxically mailbox every month. 53% off. J53 Life. For life, baby. Also, wonderful products that Jamie loves, like the Chocolate. Tastes like chocolate, if you were wondering. Amazing superfood, great for smoothies. Definitely get over there and get a bag of the Chocolate. They got organic cacao beans. Any of these products are great. I recommend them. I've tried them all. At the Orlando event, we gave out tons of Chalk supplements. So definitely get over to Chalk.com. Also, hopefully you guys saw today's talk over on the 4th hour. I think it came out really good. Everybody said they really enjoyed that. Kind of a boil down talk about what we did tonight in 2+ hours. So if you're looking for that, you can go get that over there. And as you guys know, sold out, almost sold out. I got a few of these left. So they're on order. So guys, you don't have to message me saying, where's my book? The books are coming, but it takes a while, as you guys know, supply lines and all this stuff. So it takes a while for stuff to get here. So meta narratives will be here soon. I sold out of the red book too. So red book is on order as well. We'll be here in a couple days. So essays on theology and philosophy, 660 something pages, almost 700 pages, all the theological writings. Signed copies over at jaysanalysis.com. We got a couple super chats. Brian McDankington. No, that was old. That's old. Sarosafol from 7 days ago. I missed his super chat. What's up, dude? He says for $10, silence. It's okay. You can say silence. The sounds of silence. Orthodox Irishman, $5. Since we can't know who God is by logic, well, we know who God is by divine revelation, and divine revelation isn't completely antithetical to logic. it transcends logic, but logic does tell us analogically some things about God, just like all the divine names do. So I wouldn't say that we don't know who God is by logic in a strict absolute sense, but we don't define his essence, certainly. But we can speak and name him in a way which does involve, to a degree, logic. Does our nous lead him to God? Right. So the noetic faculty is our heart. And that's principally the organ that we have for knowing God directly. But the nous doesn't completely go against or negate the mind or the intellect. Both of these faculties work in harmony in terms of knowing God. But the nous, the heart, is what the real way to know God. That's why repentance is necessary for the mental faculty to work correctly. Right? That's why you can't just do a mental thing. Right? It's not an intellectual endeavor. Oh, I know all of the facts, therefore I know and have mastered orthodoxy because I know all the rational facts. No, it's not like that. So you got it out of whack, right? And getting it in the right order doesn't go to the opposite extreme where you say, I'm such a pious Orthodox person that I don't do anything debate, anything logical, anything rational. That's all evil, and I'm super spiritual because I'm like noetic and whatever. No, two extremes. Orthodox Irishman, $5. Everyone venting on Twitter over the passing of Monarchs. In reality, did she have a direct role in inner intrigues? Well, I don't see how you could have that role of power and symbolic stature and structure without supporting what everyone else around you supports. Is it possible that maybe she had like private, correct, virtuous views? Perhaps. I don't know. But, when it comes to assessing leaders and their status, you have this idea in canon law, for example, of the public sphere, right? So what people do in the public sphere is what determines the public attitude. So, for example, we get this a lot with Roman Catholics where they try to say things like, well, you can't judge Pope Francis going into a mosque and praying, or Pope Benedict praying towards Mecca in the mosque, because you don't know his heart. I don't have to know his heart, because in your own dumb canon law, you have the idea of the public sphere. And so actions done in the public sphere betray the inner desires and motivations. So it's not even a question of me judging somebody's heart, because exterior actions manifest the interior disposition in your own anthropology, trads. That's why clerics, for example, are subject to various canonical penalties, not on the basis of their interior desire and motivations, because nobody can know that. They're subject to canonical penalties for their public actions. And it's the same in the public domain with rulers. So all these people saying all this stuff about you can't judge somebody's heart are ignorant and dumb. Based Pay Piggy, $50. Thank you for owning the Limos who defend the Luciferian royals. Thank you for providing the needed context for complex issues. Yeah, I mean, when a royal goes against... By the way, you want somebody who was in the royal family who was honorable and should be touted? Her name was Diana. She's the one that had some virtue and knew what was going on. And what happened to her? So you want me to tout somebody who was a virtuous group person in that whole sphere? Well, how about Diana? And why is nobody talking about her? And thank you for that super chat there, Bays Pay Piggy. Stephen Alexander, $20. God be with you, Jay. I became Orthodox 27th of last month. Awesome. That's great to hear. I converted from Protestantism to Orthodoxy, and a lot of it was due to your material. Oh, thank you, man. Glad to hear that. Your refutations were concise, or I don't know about concise and informative. I've never heard anybody say that the stuff that we do over here is concise. You're the first person to ever say it's concise, because it's always like 4 hours, dude. So, but hey, if 4-hour talks are concise to you, then that's awesome. Steven out. No, that was Steven. Excuse me. 20. Nectaria123. This was a great stream. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nectaria. Glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully I made all the points clear. I don't know what else I could elucidate. By the way, there's all these crazy, awesome, historical rabbit holes when it comes to British intelligence and all this. I should actually lecture through the Doral book. I mean, this is a beast, and this one is amazing. It's really deep. Goes into the real history of MI6. And by the way, not everybody's evil. Not everybody's bad. There's a lot of heroes that did great things in the Cold War. Because we can't be overly black and white and act like, oh, everybody in this country was bad and everybody over here was good. Okay, it doesn't work like that in geopolitics. It's very nuanced. It's very complex. There's a lot of competing allegiances that people have. God, country, family. Well, what happens when I'm placed in a situation where my allegiance to those things are all I'm all conflicted? And if you've watched any of the streams that I've done on spy movies and espionage, in fact, we just covered this in the Le Carre, Richard Burton movie, Spy Who Came In From the Cold. It's a great example of being conflicted in these kinds of roles. And what Le Carre does in a great way in that story, in that presentation, is show that conflict, right? Because the Richard Burton character is at the behest of his masters in England, and then he gets wrapped up in the Soviet intrigues and trying to foil the East Germans and their intelligence networks, whatever. And then he finds out that he's in the middle, and it's actually the people who are the ones that are getting screwed over on both sides. So that's the reality. That's the complexity of this. But people didn't even watch that stream, so I don't. People don't. I mean, I can't figure out if people are just dumb or if this stuff is boring and they don't care about it. It's weird to me. Like, why would you not want to know what was really going on in the Cold War? I mean, I've devoted at least 10 years of my life, the last 10 years, to this question. To me, it's fascinating. By the way, a big piece of this is Tavistock Institute, which, if you haven't read Daniel Eslin's excellent book on Tavistock Institute, I highly recommend reading that. That will help you. By the way, I don't agree with everything in that book. There's some chapters I kind of disagree with, but overall, it's a good book. Definitely not a FED. $10. I see you enjoy drinking coffee. What coffee shop do you usually frequent? Obviously, I'm not telling you, a guy who says that, implying that you're a Fed, where I go to get coffee. I don't go to coffee shops. I make my own coffee with the espresso machine that I have in there. And I wouldn't tell you where I get a coffee anyway if I did get coffee at coffee shops. So typically, I'm kind of at the point where I'm so picky with my coffee that most coffee shops suck. That's gross. They use nasty, cheap coffee. So I don't go to coffee shops. I'm past that in terms of like picky elite coffee snobbery. I have a nice espresso machine that was a gift, and that's what I do. And I go and buy my own snobby coffee beans and grind them up. So I look down my nose at coffee shops. You go to a coffee shop? The only time I had better coffee than what I make was at a place that had a $40,000 espresso machine. So if you got a $40,000 espresso machine in your coffee shop, then you probably make better coffee than I make, because I don't have that. And that's crazy. $40,000 espresso machine. Anyway. All right. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's stream. All this ties into the talks that we've done in the past on all the Ian Fleming stuff. All the Bond streams. I mean, have you guys not watched the James Bond streams that I've done? I've done tons of those. Got like 100 pages in my book on this stuff. So you need to up your knowledge if you don't know about this stuff, and listen to more of what I talked about, and because I've talked about this forever. And by the way, guys, remember, you can go to my channel Instead of messaging me, where's your talk on this? Have you ever done this? There's a search bar on everybody's YouTube page on the front. You can actually search on your own on the front page of my channel the stuff I talk about. Now, unfortunately, sometimes stuff doesn't come up because of it being buried in the algorithm, sometimes by design. So guess what? You can go to Rockfin, where I have almost all my material moved over. I think I'm up to 600 or 700 videos that I have moved to Rockfin. Still working through that. Be sure and subscribe to my Rockfin because there's a lot of unique content over there, as well as the website. You can search my website. You can search my Rockfin. Things come up there. Maybe they don't come up on the YT. Okay, well, they come up there. So search. Don't be lazy. Get over there and search, dude. Thank you guys so much. Fun stream tonight. For all the people that got butthurt today, I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings. I'm sorry that my tweets enraged you.